All right, I'm just going to do a quick check and see if our panelists are out there because we are going to be jumping into our panelists. So looks like we have 2 panelists here. So I'm going to just jump right into our state leader panel. And then as our 3rd panelist, if she appears, she will appear. So we currently have Vicki Deisner, who is the USA State Leader for Ohio and the Executive Director of Ohio Animal Advocates. And we have Sherry Storms here, who's a USA State Leader for Indiana, Executive Director of Pet Friendly Services of Indiana. And we're going to talk about Building a United Front, a panel conversation with USA state leaders. Just a little bit about both Vicki and Sherry. I'm going to share a little bit about their background. Vicki is the Executive Director of the Ohio Animal Advocates and a founding member of the Coalition of State Animal Advocacy Organizations. OAA is United Spay Alliance's Ohio partner, hosting the Ohio Spay Neuter Connection that provides statewide resource lists, including low-cost spay neuter, TNR, pet food pantries, and where to report cruelty. OAA's community cat programs include annual statewide and regional community cat summits, where last year, along with our partner Together Initiative for Ohio's Community Cats, introduced the first statewide comprehensive list of spay, neuter, and TNR resources and the report on Ohio's TNR deserts. And then I'm also going to just share a little bit about Sherry. Sherry is the Executive Director of Pet Friendly Services of Indiana. She made the jump from environmental policy work to animal welfare, joining the board of Pet Friendly Services of Indiana in 2005 to help grow the grassroots organization. Within 5 years, Pet Friendly Services attained a specialty license plate, providing the organization with the needed revenue stream to fund spay-neuter surgeries across Indiana. Pet Friendly Services now has a network of 125 vets, provides financial assistance to shelters and rescue groups, as well as to limited income pet owners, and they are fantastic at selling nuts. I just bought nuts.
Thank you, Stacy. Our founding women had a great sense of humor about spay neuter.
So I just have to, I got that email and I was like, oh, I have to buy some. This is amazing. So, Kristen, I just want to reach out. I am not seeing Liz out here. Is Liz on the phone, or we just don't have Liz yet?
Liz will be coming. She's in a little bit of traffic. She said she'll be on in 10 minutes. So we're keeping an eye out for her in the background, and you guys can go ahead and start your conversation.
Okay, excellent, excellent. All righty, so I'm going to first start out with Sherry. If you can introduce yourself and your organization, just share a little bit about it.
Okay. Thank you, Stacy. So yeah, my name is Sherry Storms with Pet Friendly Services of Indiana. We changed our name from Spay Neuter Services to Pet Friendly because we are the #4 selling specialty license plate in Indiana, and it says Pet Friendly on it. So we wanted our donors and our license plate purchasers to know that there's a tie-in between our organization and the plate revenue. We are a spay neuter service provider. We are a statewide financial assistance organization. And what that means is that we're fundraising. We don't have any animals in our care. We provide free spay neuter certificates to rescue groups and shelters and community cat programs each year. And that has been just dynamic because shelters really, really need the rescue groups to pull animals and to prevent intake. Community cat programs, of course, are wonderful programs for preventing intake of animals that are not going to fare well at a shelter. So those are just ideal. And through our programming, we have been able to launch the community cat program really to incentivize community cat programs across Indiana by providing them with more free spay neuter surgeries than we do for shelters and rescues, because we know that the community cat programs, they're kind of a difficult challenge in that there are no adoption fees. There's not, there aren't the things that you would have with organizations that have adoptions and that have dogs. So there aren't adoption fairs and all those kinds of things. And of course, we know that cats are kind of the stepchildren of animal welfare. And that the more we can do for them to elevate and, as Stacy says, normalize TNR. That's really, really all good stuff. So our organization does that. We also provide spay-neuter surgeries for $25 for limited income people in our state. We're able to do 100 surgeries per week through our online application, and then we get some paper applications coming in as well. We have a budget of about $1 million for 92 counties, so it's not a lot of money. So we work to really stretch our dollars and do more for cats and dogs in our state.
Excellent. Vicki, you want to share about your organization?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. I'm Vicki Deisner, and I have been in a little bit different situation than Sherry. Our organization is a statewide advocacy organization, which includes not only lobbying on a variety of animal welfare issues, but also creating programs to support policy and cultural change in moving animal welfare forward in Ohio. In fact, we're pretty proud of the fact that over the last 10 years, actually, we were rated with the Animal Legal Defense Fund as 45th in the nation for animal welfare, and we're up to 25 now. And so we're very proud of that in a variety of laws and policies and programs that we've gotten put forth. That includes, obviously, the work we do with community cats and pushing those issues. We are happy that both Kenneth Scott Charitable Trust and Joni Bernard are supporting our community cat summits this year. We're getting brave after the post-pandemic, and we're going to do on 11/4 an in-person in Cleveland, and on 11/11 we're going to be doing an in-person in Cincinnati. And then early next year we're going to be doing a virtual workshop, as we've done the last 3 years, for Ohio and for Kentucky and Indiana. We are really glad that we were able to push issues such as looking at the aspect of, where are all the resources that are needed for folks that care about spay, neuter, and TNR. I will point out, as you said, Stacy, we also do where to report cruelty, but we also have pet food pantries that were so important during the pandemic. And actually, a lot of people visit our website for that reason, because obviously low income issues are still going on. And we also have where to find a safe haven for companion animals that a domestic violence victim needs to get out, of the abusive situation, and wildlife rehabbers. And actually, within the next month, we're going to be adding a list of vets around the state, companion animal vets, not only to to provide for people, but for our use in surveying veterinarians on a number of different issues that are important. The vet shortage is one of them that is becoming more expansive in our state as well as others, but there's also other issues that we need to really reach out and make connections with our vets on the ground, because we also know that sometimes the state veterinary medical associations do not represent the entirety of everyone, sometimes because of cost. We have been a state leader for approximately 2 years, and I just can't recommend without enthusiasm, to be honest, anybody thinking of becoming a state leader to do so. Esther and Stacy and Bree are just wonderful people to work with. There are benefits on the ground for that state organization, not only in helping to expand our own state and spay, neuter, and TNR lists, but you help us do that. You help everybody on the ground. Bree has come up with an opportunity to provide grant information to state leaders that they can reach out to on their ground. And obviously the quarterly meetings that we all have just gives an opportunity for people to network and to learn, great things that are going on in other states that you may want to replicate, or things you've thought about and maybe other people have tried and maybe it's going nowhere, and you might think, well, maybe I don't want to do that. But networking is so important. It's something I believe in so much. I have worked both for state organizations and national organizations. And when I worked in the environmental community, similar to what Sherry did originally, though she worked on the government side, though I did too, but definitely it's harder for states to sometimes, really, you might say, get new ideas when they're not a national group without networking with other people. It's so critical to, come up with great ideas. I mean, I know I've been on calls where, the issue has come up, what can the vets do to kind of help, you might say, increase some of the issues like veterinarians getting, the cost is so high in veterinarian school. What do they do to pay off the debt? Well, in Ohio, we passed a bill where actually there's a fund that the OVMA put together, and actually it will, if people go out and do spay neuter for free, and so many spay neuters ends up being so many dollars in a reduction of their loans to vet school. So ideas like that sharing are so important for all of us. I will say, I believe it in so much that recently, over the last 2 years, I've also worked with a number of other groups across the nation to start a coalition of state animal advocacy organizations, because folks who do that advocacy need to share ideas about what possible legislation can be passed, to expand efforts across the board. But I do want to point out, recently, just Friday, Sherry was on talking about, because we're looking into, as a national group too, what are the spay neuter issues, what are the vet shortage issues, and how can, you might say, our set of groups be a help and assistance in this area, and how can we fold that into the work we do. So I just want to recommend to anybody out there that's thinking of becoming a state leader, because there's still openings. It is such a benefit, and it's such a great group of people to network with. Thanks, Stacy.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you so much. And I see Liz, you've popped right up here.
Hi, Stacy. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much.
No problem. So just share a little bit about your organization, the state you represent, and maybe how long you've been a state leader.
Yeah, this is Liz Rudder. I'm with Operation SPOT, that's Stop Pet Overpopulation Today. Our mission is to eliminate the unnecessary euthanasia of dogs and cats in St. Louis and surrounding areas. And to that end, we have a mobile clinic that we've been running since 2011. And we do a lot of work with local veterinarians who we always hold dear and work with in collaborative efforts. We've been with the USA since February, so we're pretty new. Esther contacted us and asked us if we'd like to help do their work in the state of Missouri. And as you know, Missouri is the #1 puppy mill capital in the nation. So we have a lot of work to do, and we are so happy to be in such a great alliance with all of the wonderful people that work at United Spay Alliance.
Excellent. Sherry, how long have you been a state leader? And you are also a board member too.
Yes, I am. Stacy, I don't know, time flies. I think it was like during the pandemic. And it worked out just so nicely for us to become a state leader, because we are a financial assistance program. We've got more than 100 vets in our network, including a mobile provider. So it was just such a natural fit. And then the United Spay Alliance team went through and made sure that all of our information was correct and that we weren't missing anything, and flipped our state from stripy green to solid green. But I will echo what Vicki said, in that it has been such a benefit. So when people contact us from other states, whether it's Michigan or Ohio, and ask about where do we get a spay neuter, I go to the map and I send them the link to the map with the state provider in their area. And as Vicki mentioned, Bree, she offered to research spay neuter grants for our state, and she sent like a giant list of spay neuter grants that are available. Now, not all of them fit our needs because we're a financial assistance provider. We're not a shelter or rescue, but we put that in an email to all shelters and rescues to let them know that these grants were available and maybe they would fit their needs. So that's just a great benefit of being a state leader. And as Vicki mentioned, she's got a couple of mobile clinics, and we do in Indiana as well, which has been wonderful. We partner with a clinic called Public Vet, and in fact, we were able to get Joni Bernard Foundation grant funding. They fund a 100-mile radius outside of Cincinnati, So they have been a big supporter of starting meaningful spay-neuter programs in Southeast Indiana through our public vet clinic. And we don't have vets in that area of the state. We don't have enough. So it's been a wonderful benefit all the way around.
I will also add to that, because of a meeting of USA, the lady from Two Mods was on, and it was wonderful to chat with her about, the coverage they do in Appalachia, and knowing that our mobile vets in Ohio really needed help in Appalachia for funding, and we certainly identified that through our TNR desert research. We made that connection between those mobile vets and actually some stationary vets in the Appalachian area with Two Mods to really help fill those gaps.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd also echo that too, which is one of our, we understand that nothing works in a vacuum. So there's the resources, spay neuter resources, but they're funding resources. There's, the human capacity as well as that financial capacity. And then there's the coordination. And I think many of our state leaders are, identifying the gaps, and also identifying the success areas. So your map, Vicki, that you have with the resources is giving you a strategic plan of looking forward as to what our goals are, but also being able to identify, are we missing some opportunities in this part of the state because of the research through this product called Instrumental that we offer. So you can say, in this county in Ohio, even as small as, is there a Walmart there and you can get Walmart funding for, $1,000, or is there a community bank that has to do charitable giving to nonprofit organizations? Thinking of the non-animal welfare grant opportunities as funding sources, I think is something that we don't necessarily bring forward to maybe a smaller organization, but yet it's totally within their bandwidth. If you are a banking customer of a private, a small savings bank, they have to distribute charitable funds in many cases, and they want to give it to their clients and that kind of thing. So there's just a lot of matchmaking that goes on to try and build, a successful supportive spay neuter package in every community. I know we've touched upon a lot about sort of cats and spay neuter. However, Liz, you did say you are in the puppy mill capital of the world. So I'd like to start with you about, what's your take on spay neuter for dogs in your state right now?
Well, I think it's a lot better than we have for the TNR for the cats, for sure. Our shelters aren't really that overcrowded with puppies at this time. We do have a law in Missouri that all dogs and cats have to be spayed or neutered when they leave a shelter or they leave animal control. So that really helps a lot. We do have spay neuter desert areas, of course, in Missouri. It's a very rural state. And a lot of times the ethos in the rural communities is not a priority for spay and neuter for dogs, especially. So I think we can do better, but I think we're not in as bad a shape as we were 15 years ago, say, with getting a hold on the too many dogs in the shelters and pounds.
Well, go ahead, Vicki.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to say, unfortunately, I have to say we're number 2 in the nation for puppy mills. Liz, we're right behind you. Yeah, and it's not a proud number to have, so to say. And actually, Missouri has a little bit of an edge on us. They actually are able to use the the Missouri Attorney General's Office for prosecution. You have gone after some of the most recalcitrant breeders and you've shut them down. And, we look at Missouri, again, this is the connections to, what can we learn from Missouri, that you've done these things. And right now we're on a campaign with the governor, a media campaign and grassroots and grass tops campaign, because this is his last term. He claims he loves dogs. We need him to have the appropriate oversight over the Ohio Department of Agriculture that refuses to revoke any licenses, has refused to refer anything to the Ohio Attorney General's office, and certainly does not maximize the fines that are at their control through the legislation that was passed. They even seem to go further, unfortunately, in some of the things that they interpret, how they interpret the law. And we had a big fight last year because even though in 2018 we got a new puppy mill regulation passed that said indeed no euthanasia or surgery that's required can be done without a veterinarian, and you would think that's pretty straightforward. The Ohio Department of Agriculture decided to interpret the word required as being medically required, and since they said tail docking, ear cropping, dew claw removal of dogs is not medically required, but it's, you know, AKC required for cosmetic reasons, they're allowing the breeders to do those surgeries without euthanasia, without pain control. And indeed, they did add, because we actually fought that at the legislature, we have something, because we're a full-time legislature, something called JCAR, which is the Joint Committee on Agency Rule Review. And they said, well, this rule is obviously in conflict with law until the Amish breeders, who have a lot of money, paid a lot to the legislators at the end of last year, at the end of the lame duck session. And all of a sudden, because then ODA had a how-to manual to give the breeders, that was going to be okay, and they passed the regulations out. So we're in a full-fledged fight, Liz, to try to catch up on what we think are some of the good things Missouri are doing. But, you know, they're pouring animals into the market. That goes to your question, Stacy, when indeed all the rescues in Ohio and the fosters are full. You know, unfortunately, some of the animals have been turned in. People that went back to work, you know, at their actual facilities, but they had adopted animals during the pandemic. Animals are being turned in. And so, you know, obviously we've lost some ground on the spay neuter we have, in a sense, because some of these, you know, the animals that are just being flooded in the market in Ohio from the breeders, particularly through Petland. I mean, it's a big issue. And they also stuck in the rules last year that the vets do not have to see any animal under 6 months, which is just deplorable, because those are the ones that are maybe going to, you know, have had injuries or death due to some of these surgeries they're doing and other things, and there won't even be any record. You know, they unfortunately would have been discarded in a pile.
Sherry, what's going on up in Indiana with dogs?
Oh, all of our shelters are full. You know, pre-pandemic, we had sort of a run on small and medium dogs where people couldn't get their hands on them, and we wondered what the future would bring. But post-pandemic, with the vet shortage, all of our shelters are full. We've got a lot of large dogs, and so we, at our organization, launched a program called the Pit Mix Fix. And so instead of the $25 limited income program, this is a $10 limited income program for people with pit mixes and dogs weighing more than 50 pounds. We'd like to dry up that overpopulation. You know, large dogs, some people really, really love them, and other people can't handle them. They're strong, they take up a lot of space, they eat a lot of food. I have a 42-pounder, and she's not, I mean, she runs me down the street. I tie her up to a cat stroller with my cat in it, and the two, I try to keep up. So they're wonderful dogs. There are just so many of them, and they require special people that want to have large dogs, and sadly, that's not the case. So we're working on drying up that source of overpopulation along with cats. We know there are always too many. And right now we are full of small and medium dogs as well.
Yeah,
think we
you
all
know,
are.
it's interesting when you're talking about, you know, sort of the pandemic and everybody returning animals, and I'm not necessarily 100% sure statistically whether that is shown or not shown with the shelter animals count statistics or not. However, if we go on that premise, the assumption would be those dogs were already spayed and neutered when they got adopted out during the pandemic. So I know with regards to what comes into shelters for cats, most of them are not spayed or neutered. Most of those cats are not sterilized. Is that not the case with dogs?
Stacy, I'm not 100% sure, but what I will say is that, you know, when we talk about the pandemic, and it's already been like 3.5 years ago or 3 years ago, but we forget that those early days when PPE was such in short supply and that vets could not get their hands on it, and medicine was in short supply. So that all went to hospitals and doctors for people and really backed up the system. There have been studies, of course. Dr. Julie Levy in Florida did a study saying that we were 2.7 million spay-neuter surgeries behind. And as your t-shirt says with the cat pyramid, we know that one surgery behind could lead to a really big excess population of cats and dogs.
Right, right. Well, it's funny because of the conversations we've had recently. We had a webinar just a few weeks ago on the neuter before adoption and how important it is that organizations stay the course and have neuter before adoption policies. And if they are short on resources, veterinary resources, and is really trying to think outside of the box and be creative about how they're accessing spay-neuter capacity. So, you know, I know in some organizations that were doing MASH style clinics for community cats, they're now doing those MASH clinics for rescues because the low income voucher program doesn't have enough capacity to handle providing for rescue spay neuter. So those weekend clinics are now filling that gap. So it's trying to understand where people are missing access to the type of spay neuter. There's one organization, all they do is provide spay neuter surgeries for rescues, or they do TNR cats. They do not deal with the public. But then there are other programs that pretty much just deal with the public. So it's this fine balancing act that goes on in the strategic planning around the state. And I think that's something else at United Spay Alliance that we try to bring, is that strategic thought. You know, try to bring it to the state leaders and then help the state leaders have some strategy around their own states and learning from each other. So like Vicki and Dan's work in Ohio, you know, I would love to see that done in every state around the country so we could further identify. I understand there is the access, what's it called, Sherry, from the Vet Shortage Task Force, access to vet care. There's a website.
Oh, it's that map that you're talking about. It's access to care. And there's a map that shows where vets are. But Stacy, even with that map, you know, I was in Jackson County, Indiana, which has one small town. It's very rural. They have one vet, and she does small animals Monday and Tuesday and large animals Wednesday through Friday. So she's out in the field visiting cows and things like that. So I kind of wonder about how great that information is on the map. They might have one vet, but they don't have a lot of access. You know, right. We're seeing it all across our state, regardless of where the clinics are located. So in Indianapolis, we have 2 low-cost spay neuter clinics, and then we have 2 right across county lines. But Indianapolis fares really poorly on that map, even though we have more access than a lot of the other communities.
Well, there's the pins on the map are not weighted, right? So in many of these studies that have happened where you have a mobile clinic, if you're there one day a month, you're looked at like a full-time clinic sitting there, you know, and so that's the next level. And we're actually working on this for the United Spay Alliance mapping, is how do we handle the mobile clinics or the clinics that are, you know, once a month or once every 2 weeks that are not your traditional 5-day a week. I mean, it's got a different weight, different capacity weight than a clinic that's open 5 or 6 days a week. It's stationary. It operates pretty traditionally in that kind of thing. You know, I'm going to ask you, I think I'll ask Liz, because you operate a clinic. There's been a lot of conversation about barriers to entry to be even able to get spay neuter surgery. So with your program, you know, how far out is it to book? And do you find people have a hard time, you know, getting a slot at your program?
You know, Stacy, we work with, the mobile clinic works with community partners. We never go into an area that we're not invited into by one of our community partners. So it is either an animal control, or it is a private animal shelter, or a municipality. They invite us in. They have to secure a recovery building for us, a climate controlled recovery building. And they're in charge of doing the appointments for our clinics. So I'm not directly involved with how far out we are, but I believe that they are only maybe one clinic away at any time from being filled up. So I don't think people are waiting in our area, in the St. Louis area, and we work, our service area is St. Louis City and 7 surrounding counties. So in that area, which is not our rural deserts, but we are seeing that there's not a long wait. There's not a long wait for our services in that community.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? I'm going to just chime in here because Dr. G's program also works with community partners too. And there was a mobile clinic called the Spay Wagon in Massachusetts, and they very oftentimes did a community partner model where the Catmobile, the clinic that I was involved with, we book one person at a time, and we use the Clinic HQ software, and people go online and they book their appointments and they bring their kitties in. So you're checking one cat in at a time versus doing 20 cats or 30 cats at a time. And thinking about it strategically for the mobile clinic model, that the Dr. G model makes sense because you can not waste, I don't want to say waste, but you can spend a lot of time with one client, right? And it's got to be a well-oiled machine. And if one client slows that process down, as Dr. G said yesterday, you're all messed up, right? And so you want to make sure that your check-in is basically done ahead of time. Anyway, you've got me strategically thinking about how our mobile clinic is one, even though I do feel it is nice to be able to help each individual person too, to be right on the front lines and helping each individual person. But then again, that's the role of the Humane Society. They're there, or the rescue group. They're the local group. We're just driving in for a day and then we're going out. So, maybe that's not who we should be.
Well, they know their community needs. They know their people in their community. We don't usually when we're coming in. So it's made sense to us, and it's been successful doing it this way.
Mm-hmm. That sounds great. Now, Sherry, you have Pet Vet. How do they work?
So it is Public Vet. It's a mobile spay neuter clinic, and they are a different animal for sure. They state about themselves that they're more like a mobile vet that just happens to do spay and neuter. So they keep a record of every animal that they see. It's like you would have if you went to the vet and you would have a folder or a history of your pet. They talk to everybody about where is this pet going afterward? Is there a safe place for this pet to go? So they're very engaged in making sure that cats that are fixed, it's a cat clinic, that they have a safe place to go after, and that they are fully vetted, and that any issue that they might have is taken care of so that they are healthy and ready to go. We started our partnership with Public Vet back in 2020, and now I think we're doing maybe 50 or 60, I don't even know how many clinics we're doing across the state. We're on track to fix 11,000 cats through the partnership. Our partnership keeps them in Indiana. They do have licenses elsewhere, so it's really wonderful that they're here. And people line up when we go out to these clinics. People are lined up for an hour to check in their cats. There's such huge public demand for spay neuter. So it's really been a wonderful partnership. I will say too about being a leader, Stacy, it's been so helpful. Indiana hosts an Indiana Animal Welfare Conference every year. So I had gone to a national conference a decade ago. I came home just feeling overwhelmed and deflated. Our organization, while we're statewide, we have 3 people. So the organizations that are big and can do all this great marketing and do this and that and the other, good for them. But for small organizations, for grassroots organizations, it's a lot to go to a national conference. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of time away from animals in your care. And the ideas can be a one-size-fits-all that are just too big for smaller organizations that are doing the lion's share of the work on the aggregate. You know, you get 100 or 200 rescue groups and community cat programs, and they're just blowing the socks off of everybody else, and they're doing it free of charge. So we host that conference every year, and you know, learning from what the United Spay Alliance is talking about and what some of the other states are talking about, that helps us bring really good content to Indiana. So I just wanted to drop that in.
Wonderful. And Vicki, what's your take for Ohio?
You know, we are trying to increase the number of mobile vets out there to address those issues of the TNR deserts. And by the way, when you come, Stacy, to be one of the speakers at our 11-4 workshop, Dr. G is going to bring up her mobile vet unit. So we're going to have an actual demo and a breakout session at lunch so people can get away from all the presentations and actually see that mobile vet unit. And in Cincinnati, our other board vet is Dr. Joanna Reen, and hers is an interesting story because they bought an RV and absolutely rehabbed it to be this really great mobile spay neuter unit. So, you know, we're going to be demoing that at the Cincinnati one. I do want to mention that funding. One interesting thing that came out of the meeting of the Coalition of State Animal Advocates that Sherry shared as a representative of USA and you know, that shortage team is the folks on, when they told their stories from the states, it turns out that the states that have government entities that hold those license plate dollars and oftentimes hold them and don't distribute them and don't have transparency like what Sherry's program would be. In Ohio, we're lucky that we don't have a government program. We don't have this robust spay neuter, you know, organization as Sherry's is, but definitely the government held funds of spay neuter are problematic and really, I think, addressing the issues because a lot of the money just doesn't get distributed at the time that it's needed.
Vicki, I'm sorry, may I cut in?
Go ahead. Go right ahead.
Vicki, how does the state get funding for their spay neuter fund? I know we have a license plate program, an animal friendly license plate program, and that money goes toward a spay neuter fund in Missouri. But I think that's the only state funding that we can access. How about yours?
Well, in Ohio, it's also license plate, and it goes to a organization that isn't quite as robust as Sherry's. But what I'm talking about, I know even Esther had trouble this summer with Maine, them kind of holding the money because it goes through the Department of Agriculture, not through a nonprofit. Same way in Kentucky. That's been discussed recently, and other states. I mean, I was shocked to find out on the call that we had that out of the, I think the 8 states that were on for this particular specific issue, I think 5 out of the 8, all the money was going through government agencies. And everybody made the same complaint that, well, they can't seem to understand how much is being held, but they know there's more money that's being distributed. And, you know, and it's so like time consuming and paper heavy in regard to applying to get it through the state. And I just think, you know, I got off that call thinking, my God, we got to do something to try to figure out how to port that money, get it away from the government agencies and into nonprofits, like, you know, with a model that Sherry has.
So Vicki, can that money go to general funds or anything else, or does it have to go back to spay neuter? It's just too laborious to...
That's a good question, because one of the states was saying, for whatever reason, that if, oh, I know what they were saying, if they had vouchers, you know, and it was distributed by vouchers and people didn't utilize those vouchers, instead of, you might say, recycling those vouchers to have money in the fund, the state didn't go through those extra steps. And so what would happen is any money that was left over at the end of the year, instead of maybe being poured back into next year, even doing it that way for spay neuter, they distributed among other divisions of the Department of Agriculture. And you know, and that's not what the intention of people that, you know, buy the license plates.
Right.
So, I mean, when you dive into those nuances, I mean, the only way to do that then a lot of times is to go back to the legislature, and you might say, re-propose legislation on where the license plate money goes. But I think that's something that we may need to look at, because there's probably more states that it goes through the government agencies than not.
So I'm going to jump in here because I have to wear my Massachusetts hat because I'm very familiar with everything that Massachusetts has done. So in general, there's probably about $700,000 that is going towards spaying and neutering through what I will call a semi-public venue. So there is the license plate money, which I want to say is about 300 maybe thousand a year, and that goes to a nonprofit. So that goes to the Massachusetts Animal Coalition, and then that's actually distributed out primarily to rescue groups to help support their spay neuter needs, whether it's community cats, whether it's just their rescue spays and neuters. So that has a focus sort of in the nonprofit space. Then there's a checkoff on the tax return. And so it's a $1 checkoff on your tax return. It says, I'd like to contribute to the Massachusetts Spay Neuter Fund. That goes through the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture, and it is administered through a voucher program. It has a connector to animal control. So animal control within the town issues the vouchers for low income spay neuter, as well as the spay neuter providers can provide vouchers also. They do limited community cats just because there's just the demand is so huge on the ownership side. That's the priority. The community cats are probably a second phase down if they have that capacity. Part of that checkoff also goes to fund animal control officer training, which Massachusetts had no animal control officer training before. Now they're requiring continuing education annually for animal control in the state, which includes a component on community cats. So they have to have take this session. And of course, also it talks about how to handle a lizard and, all those fun things too. But there is, as part of the curriculum, community cats are in there and an understanding and support of TNR. The Massachusetts Department of Agriculture has come out publicly in support of TNR. And I actually interviewed Mike Cahill for the podcast, and he came out very strongly in support of trap neuter return and supporting that. The program's been so successful, there is an advisory council of outside parties that supervise this initiative. So they are the checks and balances and it has a veterinarian, it has a advocacy person, it has a shelter person on it. There's 5 categories, animal control. There's 5 levels of categories that are covered in that board that is overseeing how these funds are spent. And then lastly, they've actually gotten $100,000, which is, not much for Massachusetts, but it's $100,000 dedicated to this fund through general funds. So they've gotten some general funds to boost this up. They've also kept some money aside for hoarding situations, or if they ever have a rabid animal in a community. There's a rabid cat or a kitten in a community. What they do is they go and they blitzkrieg. So they'll go in with mobile clinics and do spay, neuter, and rabies vaccines all throughout the community. Rather, in the past, if there was thought to have exposure to rabies, they would trap, remove, and euthanize. And so they've really changed their structure and how they're operating. And like if there's a hoarding situation, they have emergency funds to provide spay neuter for a hoarding situation. So I'm always the optimist, I guess I would say. Sherry Gustafson has been running the program for years under Mike Cahill, and I think she's done a great job. And I highly recommend folks that if you want to look at what I think is a pretty strong model, I would reach out to her definitely. And then
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So Massachusetts doing all of this really great work, how did they figure out, did they have stakeholders reach out to help them? Did they bring somebody in that knew the ins and outs of animal welfare? And I ask because, we talk about governments having the money, but do they have the stakeholder input from all of us to help talk to them about financial assistance programs? Because that's basically what they're running. And then, of course, let's be sure to mention Peter Marsh and his 2 free downloadable books at shelteroverpopulation.org.
Yeah, for sure. Peter is certainly leader on that. I will say, so there was an organization before the Massachusetts Animal Coalition that back in the late 90s that started the advocacy about the plate. So in, I forget the name of what we were called before we were Massachusetts Animal Coalition, but I was going around State House in Boston with my daughter, who was 18 months at the time, and I was using her as bait. Because every politician loves a little cute girl in a dress, right? And so going around and really pitching, spay neuter and telling them how, my daughter has Blueberry as her foster kitten home in the bathroom and all that other stuff. And so, sort of using that. But the driver, honestly, so the starting Massachusetts Animal Coalition started in 2000, and I think 2002 was when the license plate got passed. Most of that was due to the hard work and efforts of the advocacy department at the MSPCA. They haven't had an attorney there, Kara Holmquist, who has been there since the beginning of time. And she really led the charge on all of these initiatives, and continues. She's still on the advisory board there. And I believe she also fully utilized her HSUS rep in Massachusetts that was there. And then obviously there were some board members from the Massachusetts Animal Coalition who were engaged, very heavily involved in, we had to sign petitions to get everything going. But honestly, I'm going to give, Kara was really the lead, the driver of the bus, and the MSPCA put in the resources of their department to really ensure that these spay neuter funds were out there, and it was in a situation where they were going to be managed appropriately. The only thing Massachusetts has not done is the pet food surcharge. I mean, I think that's the last out of the 4 potential items. Oh, and there's the dog licensing fees. That's Peter's style, is having $1 off the dog licensing fees to go into a spay neuter fund, and that's what New Hampshire did. So I guess there's maybe 5, and I'm sure I'm not thinking of something, but anyway.
But I would challenge all of our states to schedule meetings with their state governments that have the funding, to let them know what a financial assistance program is. And in Peter's book, Getting to Zero, I believe it's chapter 5, what's a financial assistance organization? I mean, we were running one and we didn't know what it was until Peter put a title on it and talked about exactly how to do it. So if people are working in a vacuum and they're not hearing from their states about how to run a financial assistance organization, then I think that's a lost opportunity. And if anyone wants to talk to Indiana about how we do it, we're happy to talk about that. I mean, really, you send out a voucher and you have to put money in a different column on the spreadsheet because that money's spent until that voucher expires. And with the vet shortage, our expiration dates have gotten longer and longer. So our money, if it's not used right away, it sits until we feel comfortable pulling it back into another column.
Right. We got a report in from Tennessee, Julie Jacobson, our state leader, who's out in the wings. And she said Tennessee manages their license plate at the state level. It's a hot potato, an additional duty. Recently, managers have been very good. She keeps in touch with them and on a regular basis. And I'm going to make a recommendation. This is something I have not done, and there are a couple of hot topics at where I live now in Vermont on animal welfare, but I have on my to-do list, which is to connect with my state leaders, my representatives, where I live, my state representatives. I mean, as far as I can go, get to know the political people and get to know them and introduce yourself as a resource, not a complainer. Right. Yeah. And so, like you say, I go to your open office hours. I just want to introduce yourself. This is what I'm involved with. This is what I'm passionate about. I'm here for you as a resource. If you have questions, somebody put something on your table, and that you want, I'm here. You can come let me know, that I'm here to review it or get my feedback on or whatever. You may, tag me as an animal welfare person in your list of supporters or not supporters, but, just try and cross the political parties and just go in there and say, you know what, I want to be in your Rolodex. How can I do that? And don't say do that at the same time. You're gonna have a conversation of like, I really need you to do this right now. Like, build the friendship, build the relationship, and create that dialogue. I know it's extra time, but then again, I'm also gonna say, listen, I had a lot of political folks, state representatives, they are able to support your nonprofit. their campaign funds can contribute to your nonprofit. Not big dollars, but they definitely can, and they can come and support your public events too. So there are things that they can do through their own networks to help increase the exposure of your own organization too. So I've been surprised with how much they will show up at, you know, who wants to show up at a fundraising event unless you're running it? I'm sorry, I'm jaded after almost 30 years of running nonprofit events, right? But, you know, but they would show up at Saturday night after dealing with politics all week long and, you know, want to go and bid on your silent auction. And I'm like, wow, kudos to you for doing that when you really could just go home and, you know, put your feet up and watch a football game or something like that. But anyway, so we have about 15 minutes left, and I'm looking at if there are any questions. Laura, you're asking how can someone find spay neuter resources for pets of homeless people in a given state, so I think that the loaded word there is homeless people, because in many cases, I don't know, Sherry, does your voucher program require an address?
It does not require an address. And we do work with a few organizations that work directly with the homeless population because they're not going to be able to go online or have something mailed to them. So yeah, I think it requires a local organization on the ground to help people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that even it seems like what I understand is like a lot of homeless people though do have phones or flip phones at minimum. And so even if it's something that can be done through text, pretty much my sense is text is what most people utilize. How do you communicate most with folks that reach out to you for services?
So we really don't. I mean, they reach out either through a paper application or an online application. If they leave us a message, we have a volunteer that calls everybody back to make sure that they get the information they need. But, you know, with 3 people in a whole state full of animal pet owners that need their pets fixed, we really don't have the boots on the ground situation. We partner with rescue groups and shelters across the state, and they do. And so they reach out to us for funding.
Mm-hmm.
We have not applied for grants specifically for homeless populations, but I think that is a really strong grant application because it brings in the people aspect. Of course, you'd have to ensure that animals have a good situation. I mean, you kind of wonder about the situation of homeless people and homeless animals, but you know, having somebody that's there with you all day, every day that loves you, if you're a pet, that's a pretty good gig.
Yeah, in Vermont, we actually have a pretty strong tradition of the homeless are actually in old hotels and motels. So they're not out on the street. And so then I was actually talking to one of the clinics in the Montpelier area, and she's like, yeah, we're doing 30 dogs of people that are staying at the Hilltop Hotel. And so they just, you know, the public or the social services organizations that's managing that is helping getting the dogs over to the clinic, getting them the services that they need and the wellness checks and the spay neuter, and then they're going back. And so, and then Positive Pantry, the organization that I run that covers Vermont and Massachusetts, you know, tries to backfill and make sure that they all have access to food and that kind of thing. So many different layers to this mosaic of animal welfare that is by far above and beyond just the Humane Society is a piece, but it's a very small piece of this puzzle that we have in our states to be able to provide for the care of our animals that are in our communities. All right. Do you each have any questions for each other at this time?
Stacy, I have a question for you. Would it be possible for USA in the newsletters that go out to actually kind of highlight some of these model programs we identified for funding, such as, you know, the Massachusetts one, which is a, you know, it sounds like it's a partner semi-government collaborative, and all the different avenues of funding, but also how they distribute the money and work with others. And Sherry's program, and maybe do a call out for how is funding handled in your state, and maybe we could kind of get a handle then on what's going on throughout the various states regarding the funding issue.
Well, we're actually working on a section just like this for the website.
Okay. Okay, good.
And Vicki, I think that's a really good idea to have like information that Stacy talked about for Massachusetts, and how that all works together, because then other states can take that when they meet with their state employees that are administering the program about other opportunities and how it can be done. I mean, if I were a state employee and given the opportunity to help animals, I would think that I had found a really great dream job. But of course, there's so much to know in animal welfare, and we forget how much we know. It sounds like it's going to be easy, and it's anything but.
Well, and I get reminded how challenging it is for folks to be able to access spay neuter on a daily basis, through the TNR certification workshops that I do, as well as all the other workshops that we do here at the Community Cats podcast. I'll get phone calls and, be like, okay, honey, now how do I get my spay neuter appointments, right? And they'll be in New York City where you have to wait 6 months to get a spay neuter appointment. So it's like, okay, how do I keep my cats from getting pregnant over the next, 6 months, and working on those challenges. And so I wrote a blog post on, how to keep your cats from getting pregnant when you're waiting for that spay neuter appointment, because it broke my heart when I heard someone say, oh, well, this cat's on the list to be spayed in October, and since June, they've had 3 litters. And it's like, it breaks my heart. It just breaks my heart, because this person got the voucher in June. They were doing the right thing. And we failed them. We failed them. And I'm not saying Massachusetts is all rosy. Sherry, you have seen the reimbursement rates to the veterinarians are incredibly high compared to other states. And that's trying to encourage more private practice veterinarians to get involved. They've got 600 vouchers on their waiting list, one of the highest lists that they've got. So, again, there's certainly challenges there, because having the providers in Massachusetts has just been really tough. So, it's not all rosy, but it is a model for sure. I don't think we all anticipated the shortages of spay neuter capacity to the levels that we're faced with right now. I never anticipated this back in 2008 when I started the Catmobile. I didn't start it because of veterinary shortages or well, I guess I should say I did. I did start it because of spay neuter capacity shortages, because I was working with 14 private practice veterinarians and I couldn't get all the services that I need. And that was in addition with doing free spay neuter clinics once a month for feral cats with volunteers. And I was doling out maybe 3 Friends of Animals certificates a week. And that was just not moving the needle in the owned community. That just wasn't going to do it. So I knew I needed to get something there. So we had to create the Catmobile to get that owned cat population, which is the base of the community cat pyramid. My goal was you do 10,000 owned cats a year, 1,000 TNRs, 500 adoptions, and like 50 barn relocations or sanctuary cats. That's your ratio for reducing cat overpopulation, in your community or in your state, whatever your target region is that you're looking at there.
And Stacy, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's an issue of cost and it's an issue of capacity. And I will say our partnership with Public Vet, it's really great. I don't know if I said this earlier, but they charge $90 and we provide them with a budget for every clinic. So if people roll in and they can't afford $90, Public Vet can discount it right there and then for them to make sure everyone can get their pets fixed. I also wanted to mention that Vicki talked about the Rascal unit and the other vets' mobile RV. Public Vet has a nice pickup truck and a pull behind, and they unload in a building. And so that's kind of a lower cost model and an easier way to get into the mobile space. And, what we're hearing from the mobile people, I think it was Dr. Gonzalez that said, the students that and the vets that she trains love it because they're able to do clinical and they're able to serve their community. And you can write your own schedule. You know, if you want to take a couple of weeks off, you can. If you want to take the winter off, if you want to go to a warmer climate in the winter, you can do whatever you want. It offers a lot more freedom to be a mobile clinic.
Mm-hmm. Couple of comments out here in the wings, just that I thought I would share with the group. So Veterans Affairs has regional homeless veteran coordinators all over the country and could be a great partnership for the cause. Every state also has veteran service organizations that help veterans with all types of resources too. So that was one suggestion from the crowd. And then here's a question. Is there any success for states without spay-neuter laws? What's a good strategy for pushing for a law in a local area? I'm going to go to Vicki first because you are the advocate person, first advocate.
Well, one thing I would suggest, and this is based on the work that Sherry and I did in Indiana, is definitely if there's a way to make sure that your state, whoever is doing the pet license plate, getting the money, that, you know, find out how much of the state is being covered. Sherry was able to produce, when we ran a spay-neuter mandated bill in Indiana, a map that showed at that time financially between the collaboration she had with low-cost spay-neuter clinics and transports and that, she had about 85% of the state covered. So when we went to run a mandated bill and asked for it to be phased in after 5 years, there was a good probability that the other 15% Sherry could cover. The other thing I would point out on that is strategically, you know, and I credit Sherry with this, I believe it was your idea, Sherry, was that, you know, she was able to get a variety of larger humane societies around Indiana to kind of show what was their cost of care per day and the number of animals coming in, what the municipality was spending, you know, to actually keep an animal there and maybe unfortunately sometimes euthanize it because of overpopulation. And that by actually instead, you know, mandating and at a situation where there was financial coverage, certainly that was going to, you might say, cut the cost for municipalities. So that was a real positive driving point to help get that bill through. I'm not saying that's you know, the only way to do it, but I'm saying that was like an ultimate way to really get that bill through. And I'm glad to answer any other questions on that.
As leaders in animal welfare, I think we're in a good position to address laws at a community level, at our city and county level. We can go and testify. We can bring facts and figures. We can do a lot of cost-efficient data to show that we need these laws. We're lucky enough in Missouri to have a very good statewide animal welfare lobbying group, the Missouri Alliance for Animal Legislation. And we work very closely with them and give them anything they need to go. They go to Jefferson City and probably takes small children or dogs or something to get the attention of the legislators. And then they can advocate for the laws that we all know that are needed. They do a great job. And I don't know if any of the other states have such an organization as that, but
Liz, that's what my organization is, and there's 25 others around the nation, and we're all part of the coalition of animal advocacy, you know, state organizations.
Good for you. Thank you.
And Bob Baker is wonderful.
Yes, he is.
And so, Stacy, to answer a little bit more of the question, is that I was so fortunate to have met Vicki Deisner. I didn't know anything about legislative stuff until Vicki rolled along. And, you know, so if you have a legislative person that you know or a lobbyist that you know, they know how the state officials are thinking and what they want to see. And a lot of time that overlaps, but it's just speaking a little bit of a different language. It's a cost rather than a life-saving type of answer.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, Sherry, to add on to that, one key to legislatures across the country, especially now with the politics the way it is if you can find a way to overlap your animal issue with the human issue. So like the spay neuter issue was, how do you save municipalities money regarding puppy mills, predatory lending, consumer fraud. Things like, I do a lot of work with domestic violence, the link between domestic violence and animal abuse, because animal abuse is the escalating factor when family violence is getting out of control. And so if you can sell it as a related human issue, find that human issue in it, you've got a bigger chance of getting legislation passed.
Excellent. All right. Well, we are at 11:15. I want to thank you all for being part of this panel and really appreciate it. Everybody's going great conversation.